That was the call to order. Now it's the call of the roll. Anna Gersh.
Here.
Anna Lemler.
Here.
Dwight Wilson.
Here.
Graydon Crapel.
Here.
Janet Haynes. I know she's absent. Lauren Tatarski. She is going to be late. Lori Saginaw. I'm here. Monica Harold. Rich Friedman.
Here.
Richard Sobel.
Here.
Robin Stevens.
Here.
And Sumi is out of town. I know that Munira said she would be a little late. I'm hoping Cecilia is coming.
Me too.
And we know Kaz is in Poland.
And Marquand's out of town too.
And Marquand is out of town. Okay, everyone's accounted for. More or less.
Paper agenda?
There is, but I don't have a copy for you.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. So, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from last meeting. And I want to make one nuanced correction, which was pointed out to me, and that is that references to the community are more accurately those in attendance, because it's not the entire community. The minutes to the last meeting are posted on Legistar, and they are also on the Facebook page.
What if I don't remember the license?
Then I'll make you a copy,
Thank you.
and I'll note that. Okay, can I hear a motion to approve them or any other amendments to them?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, minutes are approved. Now, the agenda for tonight. I have to apologize because I sent the agenda to Carrie to post on Legistar, and I sent it to Anna to put on the Facebook page, and there was an omission, which is my responsibility, of one key item, which I would like to add, and that is that we have a discussion and a vote about the adoption of the template by the task force to use as a guide for the process of drafting the finished document. Is there someone who would be willing to move that be added?
So moved.
Thank you, Rich. Okay. Now, it's important to clarify that adopting it does not mean that we are accepting the document as it's written. And it does not mean that it is the only format to be considered. We have been offered alternative templates from two groups. CAUSE, which is the Coalition Against White Supremacy, and Transforming Justice Washtenaw. What it means is that it provides a guide for discussion and comments, and that its content is wide open for acceptance, revision, or replacement. Also, to be clear, the entire process that we are going to use going forward is fluid, and we will not vote to make decisions as we discuss all the articles in that template. Nothing will be set in stone or unalterable until the very end. If the template is adopted tonight, the discussion and collection of comments about Article 1 begins tonight. So the next item on the agenda is the update on the Arrowwood listening session, which took place on Tuesday, the 19th of June. Is there anyone who was present at that listening session from the task force who would like to give us a brief summary of what you heard from the attendees?
Sure. So from the task force, the people who were present was Lori, myself, Robin, and Lauren. I believe that's right. And there were about 13 youth and 2 adults, actually 3, other than ourselves. And we had a conversation about what experiences have been like for them with policing and what they would want the task force to know about their experiences, or what they would like the commission to be able to do. And so they shared stories of negative interactions with the police. So that included being close to the interaction that happened this fall at the Blake Transit Center. And also people described situations that had happened to family members and in their neighborhoods. And so being either either directly impacted or indirectly impacted. And there seemed to be a general sense of either being educated or experiencing the desire to not want to be around police if and when they are around. That's basically.
We asked at the very end if I could step out of the facilitator role and report. Is that okay? If there were any questions they had, and one young man shared that he would like to know what is inside the cop's head when he decides whether to shoot or not. And then another young man appreciated that we were there to listen, and he said he had some hope that he wouldn't have to be fearful. These were all black youth, some mixed race, all living at Arrowwood. Between the ages, we asked them how long before they could vote, and I would say that they were between 15 and 17. My sense is that some had neutral experiences with the police, but all had a distrust, a fear, largely taught in their household as a way of being safe. So no real relationship. And when we asked if they would be willing to sit and talk with police, my sense was they all said no.
I think there were 3 or 4 that said they would.
Okay.
Yeah, one of them said someone would have to be there with them to make him feel safe. But I thought there were 3 or 4 that said they would.
Anything else?
You can take it however you want. This is not me advocating for the police or anything, but I'm reporting what I heard and what I saw and what I perceived. So a lot of the stories that they told us did not involve the Ann Arbor police, with the exception of the Blake Transit Center incident and the incident where the cousin was arrested for something and was manhandled by the police. The majority of the other stories that they told us and reflected on involved either Ypsilanti or the Washtenaw County Sheriff Department. And we heard many of those stories. So.
Okay. Update on any other educational efforts or community engagement? You want to talk about the invitation from YIMBY? Rich?
That was Jessica's group. So it's a community group that is hoping to organize a lunch session, perhaps July 19th or July 20th, with interested members of the task force. I said I'd be willing to go there. I think they had in mind somewhere around the library. I thought, around the library, July 19th or 20th might not be a good time and place because of the art fair, but maybe a different place that day. I'd be happy to go, and if we'll keep you posted as we learn more. If any other members would like to go.
So basically, this is a segue into the fact that the task force is open to speaking to groups about the process, about the template, about the goals that we're working to reach. And we can be reached through an official email address, which is Police Task Force. Each of those words is connected and capitalized at a2gov.org. Okay. Update on the template sharing. So everyone here has either on your seat or in front of you at this table a hard copy of Article 1 and Article 3 of the template. There are 4 articles in the whole template. The entire template is posted on Legistar. It is also available on the Facebook page. What you see is the template without the commentary. What is posted is the template with the commentary. I removed the commentary tonight so that it was clearer what the verbiage and the content is that we're focused on. But the commentary you're welcome to, and we can provide it for you if you can't access it those other ways. The commentary, just to be clear, is that of the author of this template. The author of this template is Rich Friedman, the co-chair, who has spent probably 200 hours researching and writing this template for all of our use. And you can see that it says draft across every page. And I want to repeat that the use of it does not mean that we agree with what's written, but it's our guide. As we go through Article 1 tonight, and if we collect comments from everyone on each part of Article 1, and we have the ability to move on to Article 3. Before we do that, we would invite public comment, which will all be recorded and received and utilized by the task force. That kind of comment can be given to us ongoing at any time in any form. We can come to you if you don't want to send it to us. In these meetings, if we feel we have reached a light consensus around any aspect of what's in the template, then we will summarize that and pass it on to city staff so that we can receive feedback from them prior to next meeting and be able to discuss it. We've already received, and I've shared with the task force, we received it today, some reflections from Mr. Lazarus on his first review of the template. So this is a fluid and ongoing process. And we'll continue this process in the 4 tonight and in the 4 upcoming meetings, which are June 28th, July 12th, July 25th, and August 2nd. We'll be continuing to collect comments and make adjustments to the template as we go along, and encourage, and this is very important, revisiting any part already reviewed if it requires more consideration, discussion, and alteration. So, at this point, I'm going to invite a discussion of the proposal to adopt this template for a guide for our discussion. From you all.
Before we get there, I don't have clarity as to what the word consensus means in this context. And I certainly don't understand what light consensus means. Could somebody help me with that?
I'll offer my thoughts. As Laurie said, this is an ongoing process, and I think because it's a complex document and parts are interrelated, and we might want to revisit. I think that what we have in mind is that rather than taking votes on this portion and then revisiting it later anyway, we would try to get a sense of the meeting and summarize that in an informal way. I mean, sometimes maybe that we'd have straw votes, maybe not, but we try to get a sense of the meeting. My thought is that then we and anybody else would be welcome to would send a memo around saying, this is how we read the meeting. Okay, if you see it differently, please tell us. I think Anna originated the term "light consensus" today. So it's her coinage. Maybe you should speak. I think I understand what you mean, and I appreciate it. Do you want to say what you meant by that?
Sure. So essentially just thinking, Dwight and others, that instead of piece by piece coming to a vote tonight and then potentially it then being a formal vote voted in, that we would be able to talk about it, have discussion, come to some general understanding of a shared content so that we can also share it with the public and with city staff to get the feedback. So today we received those 5 pages of comments from Howard, which is in direct correspondence to some of that content. And so that would allow everyone to be more a part of our processes versus saying tonight we're saying the name, we're making the vote, and then that's what it is.
Can I add one other thought? I really do see this as a very fluid process and one in which we need to be flexible. So I can imagine, assuming we do a vote to use this as a framework, I can imagine, I would love it if it happens, that there would be some clauses in which the task force would say, looks good as it is. That would be wonderful. There might be some in which there's a sense, looks good, but we should change these 2 words and we can do it on the spot. That would be great. There might be some where it's, well, we need to wordsmith this a little bit, and then we'd have to take it back and say, well, we'll come back. We'll maybe I'll come back with something, or maybe somebody else and I working together, or maybe somebody else working together, we'll come back to. I mean, I think there's all sorts of ways that the discussion might go, and I think we need to be flexible as we go. That's my thought, and I thought that went along with the idea of light consensus, that everything then can be revisited in light of our further discussions and public comment.
Does that answer your question, Dwight, satisfactorily?
I try to practice the philosophy that one of my grandfathers used. He never said anything that you had to read between the lines.
Yeah.
And there wasn't anything between the lines. I just didn't know what it meant.
Yeah.
Because as a Quaker, when we use consensus, one person can stop 500 from moving forward. And I've seen that happen. But others, it's a vote without people putting their hands up. And so I understand what you're saying now. I'm easy with it.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the task force?
I'm just curious about just so I understand the process, and I guess what feels to me like just a formality. What is the point of adopting the template? Just so I have an understanding.
Can I speak to that? I'm acutely aware that this, I made no bones about it, this is my work. All it is my work. I did it without any authorization from anybody or anything, okay? As far as I'm concerned, anybody who had the time and inclination could have tried to do it. It took a lot of, I don't think it was 200 hours just for this, but there's a lot of background, but it took a lot of hours. But it has no official status.
Yeah.
So if we're going to talk about it and we're going to move through it bit by bit, which I hope we do, I think the task force has to make a decision to do that. Okay. So that's what I'm hoping. That's all it is, that we're going to use that as a framework for discussion. So when the question is, okay, we've talked about section 1.1, we're going to move on to 1.2. The question is, why are we doing that? Well, because we've decided to operate in that way. That's all it means.
Okay,
Okay.
cool. And so obviously that means when other templates are presented, that we engage in those templates, or if there's additional content that we want to add.
We'll consider whatever is presented to us,
Cool.
obviously. But I'm hoping that this will give us a sort of a structure moving forward.
Okay.
There's no attempt to foreclose anybody from offering any draft at all.
Got it. Just want to make sure I fully understood.
So we have 7 members of the task force present who have voting status. So how many are going to vote right now in favor of adopting the template as our guide for discussion? Okay. Anyone opposed? Didn't look like it. All right, then let's move forward.
Can I ask a point of clarification?
Sure.
So I think what I heard you say is you could have this template, but you could have any number of others. But is it your intention to have something to put forward on the day of your last meeting? Or is that not a goal? Because I'm not clear if you take as many templates as could be offered that you would finish your work by the date that we've been given.
Well, that's a legitimate question, Paquetta, and I appreciate your asking, and it is a big consideration, but I think that there exist different views on how this commission can be structured, and we want to factor them in. So the sooner we get them, the better, but this is ongoing. So we will consider things as they come to us. And for the sake of the goal, we would like them as soon as we can have them.
But is it your goal to be done on
Yes,
the date?
it is our goal. In answer to your question, it's our goal and it's our commitment.
To be done on the date that
We have to be done with our draft.
to present. Okay, I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
Because if you accept as many templates as may be offered, you obviously may not be able to give equal attention to each of them. And therefore, that could be problematic for people who feel like, my feeling is, if you guys are the ones doing it, which you have been charged to do, that's different than opening it up and saying, anybody who wants to, give a template. That's my concern.
Yeah?
I think that that's a helpful way of framing it, Paquetta. But really, we shouldn't, I think that viewing this as competing templates, you could look at this a little differently. Everyone who speaks in public comment and everybody who speaks around this task force table have ideas. And we consider those ideas. And it's a combination or accumulation of those ideas that in the end will turn out to be a work product. You are right that if on the day that we've committed to finish it, someone raises their hand and says, I want you to consider this book, we won't do it.
Too late.
It's too late. Now, even in this process, each time we move forward, and so I think that at least dealing with your language of template, there are others who say, we would like to submit something to you for consideration. And the task force has said, give it to us and we'll look at it. If someone gets up here and says something, we listen to it. We take notes. We adopt good ideas, whether it come in template form or just a speaker suggesting that this is a better way of doing something.
Howard?
If I could add, one of the comments that I sent earlier today is task force is considering whether to do this by resolution or by ordinance. It's one of those things that co-chair Friedman had put together. If something is going to be adopted by ordinance and it gets into the city code, it has to have a certain structure to it. and it will have a list and a description of purpose and intent and roles, responsibilities, and authorities. There has to be a format to it. So I think what Mr. Friedman tried to do is provide that structure so that it can fit the content that will get through open discussion. So what I would advise is having kind of that skeleton is the word that you use. Having that available enables and promotes the discussion of what will go into the content, and what's more important is the content necessarily than the structure, because the structure is what enables it to be adopted at some point in time. So I just ask that you consider that. So when you talk about alternate templates, what I would hope is you focus on alternate ideas that get integrated and use the template as the means to that end. Because if you choose to pursue this by ordinance, then it has to be in some format that can be integrated into the city code.
You had a comment, and then Sergeant.
Yeah, so you said that there was a couple documents submitted by a couple other groups?
No, I did not.
Oh.
I said that we heard that we would be receiving them,
Oh, okay, great.
but we have not received them at this time.
Register when you get them, or?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
I'll wait.
Okay. Did you have a comment?
No, I think I'm sure.
Lori?
Yeah? Shirley?
My concern with this document, and you're speaking for me as the community, a person in the community, and I don't think I gave you permission to speak for me. So my concern is, and I'm trying to scan over this quite a bit, and you say you're going to consider if we speak tonight and say something, but we've been speaking. And I don't know if you've heard us or considered what some of us have said, but how is the community going to have input in this document, this template that I just received, and when am I going to have time to go over it to see? I might want to say something tonight, I might not have time, so I have a little concern that you took it upon yourself to do this, and at every meeting I've been at, even though I know your intentions are good, you haven't represented me properly yet in my concerns. So I have a concern about that with this template. So how am I going to, so what you're saying is I got to read this, and if I have some concern or I want to add, I got to write something else and present it? Is that what you're saying?
No. Would you allow me to respond? Do you want to respond, Anna?
No, I was just going to ask that you talk more about the process of how this is going to be collaborative in a way that we hope.
Okay. So let me try to be clearer. There are words on this page that follow a format that is consistent with how an ordinance would be structured. So we have put it out here, and it's been available for a while now. When did it go up on? What is today? Thursday? It went up on Monday. There's no time limit, Shirley, about commenting on what's here tonight. You can set up a meeting with me, and we can sit down and talk about it at Panera. It can happen tomorrow, it can happen Saturday, it can happen Sunday, it can happen at the next meeting. You don't have to write it. You can say, I am confused by this, I don't understand what this means, or I don't like the tone here. And the reason I don't like it is this, and this reason. So those are the kinds of comments that we're looking for from everyone, not just who's sitting here in this room, but this document is out there. So from anyone who wants to give us feedback on it. And people sitting around here have comments about it also that we haven't heard as a group too. So this is a big, I don't know what to call it. It's not a brainstorm really, but it is an open session to hear and talk and discuss about what's written.
So just to add more clarity, tonight's structure on the agenda, from what I understand, is that we're going to go through some of the sections, and we're going to go through like section 1, have public comment, and then discuss more. Section 3, public comment, discuss more. So you don't have to also take out extra time in your day to do this if you don't want to. We're going to talk about it tonight. The words I would use is working session, and we're doing that together.
Working session,
So,
I like that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is a work.
Yes, hopefully, and we're about to project it up here so that we all can see it. We can look at whatever, together and then talk about it. You have a question?
Yeah, so I want to just reiterate a few points that I think are lost in this. And one is that the organization's asking to write alternate recommendations that would be considered as equals to this in terms of the task force consideration are longtime organizers that were critical in bringing the task force to fruition, including members of the HRC and organizers in Ann Arbor like Shirley that have been organizing their whole lives. So it's not actually, these are people putting forth labor that have been putting forth labor to work alongside. So it's sort of like a parallel process. And we're asking to be equal parties of that. So CAUSE participated early last summer around the Hilliard Heinz intervention in Ann Arbor. Many members of CAUSE became part of Transforming Justice. Many members of CAUSE became part of Transforming Justice, and Transforming Justice, along with, worked with a lot of community members and were sort of critical in this entire process over the last year. So I want to highlight that point, that this is actually building off of community voices. We're continuing to try and center people who've been doing this work in the community for a long time. Not to dismiss the labor that's been done by the task force. We're asking for you to acknowledge the voices of community members as sort of part of this larger process. And given that Rich and others were appointed in ways that are confusing at best to community members, we think it's fair that you offer a more open consideration of community voices. The second point that I would like to make is that Rich's assertion that he's written this received a lot of public comment in a few years ago. In part because it establishes a de facto baseline that his personal work is at stake here. And no matter how collegial you all are, you now have a member of the task force that's done all of this work on their own, and any comment you offer, any critique, any pushback, you have to direct at a single member of the task force, one who actually has been endowed with a lot of power. And that seems to me a strange way to start the process. So what I think we're asking for has been a little bit misunderstood. We're asking not just to participate in the public discussion, we're asking for very clearly for other proposals to be considered equal parties to this conversation, because these community organizers and community voices like Shirley's have been part of this process all along. And centering Rich's labor erases that. It is important to acknowledge he's done this work and he has this expertise, but it's not a gift to the community. It actually endows him with more power as an authority over a process. Whereas Shirley points out, he hasn't been responding to community members as they ask questions. They ask about his understanding of policing in Ann Arbor. So that's what we're asking you to vote on. We're not asking to be considered. We're asking to be a part of the process in a way that maybe you hadn't understood. For a number of other proposals to sit alongside the the task force. And they may include similar elements. There may be copying and pasting, but they would be distinct. They could be responses, they could be notes in the margin, or they could be wholly new documents. But they would be considered as distinct.
Yeah, Robin.
And I want to acknowledge what you're saying, Sergeant, that this whole process has been confusing. I thought I was volunteering as a neutral party to a process. I did not understand, as Shirley said, that I am speaking for the community. That was not my understanding when I applied. And if that was anyone else's understanding, please explain that to me, because I didn't get that. I thought we were applying as neutral parties to try to look at this thing with fresh eyes, different people, different backgrounds, hear from you, hear from them, and then come up with what we as neutral parties would consider a workable document. And so I agree with you that this process has been confusing. And I am frustrated that there's not more explanation to the public. I don't feel like I'm your voice, Shirley. I think I'm here to hear your voice. I don't think that I'm here to override you, to talk over you, to not hear what you're saying. I think I'm here to hear what you're saying, to hear what the other side is saying, and to try to put the two together in such a way that the community can move forward and be better.
Can I respond?
Absolutely. If I don't know, I'm not the chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I mean, yeah.
Please.
Okay. You are not, first of all, my biggest concern. Let me get up here so I can say what I need.
Have a seat.
My concern is this task force came about because hours and efforts and fights of this community
Absolutely.
came about. Can somebody just go in there and shut my phone off, please? Thank you. Because of the death of Laura Rosser. I became very concerned when I found out by talking to different people on this task force that most of you had no idea why you're on this task force. You needed to have a history of how you even got here. You got here because of our fighting, and it was a hard fight. It wasn't well received. They didn't want this. We had to fight for it, and we're continuing to fight the task force to be heard. And then you come up with documents that we didn't help write this. And you are here to speak for me and the rest of this community. You're not here to be neutral.
And I just totally disagree with that.
Well, I'm telling you,
That's
what
not
we-
fair
I'm
to my community. I live in this community. I don't want anyone in this community making decisions for me. I want to be part of that decision-making process.
but you can't do it by yourself without the community.
And we're not trying to.
And you, in what I have been hearing, which I'm confused since we talking, first you came out with some good statements, and then you came out glorifying the police like they haven't done anything wrong. And then I've heard from some of the students at the Arrowwood session that I wasn't at, that they didn't feel comfortable by some of the things you said. We are not here to put the students on line. We're here to listen to what they got to say. We're not here to talk about their attitudes or anything else. We're here to listen to what's going on between them and the police. Now, if that doesn't set well with you,
It's just fine with me, and I think you've been misinformed about what happened.
well, I'm just going by
Exactly.
talking to
You're
some
going
of
by
the
what you
students.
heard, not what you saw,
No,
not what you
I
observed.
just said that.
Exactly.
But I'm just saying.
You didn't ask me for my side. And again, I don't want to get into a discussion. You and I can meet for coffee anytime, my house, your house, I don't care. And we can talk this through, Shirley. I have no problem with that. And I have no problem with standing up for anything that I say, because I know that I'm coming from a place of neutrality. I'm trying to understand the situation. I'm very aware what happened with Aurora. I'm very aware of the work that you all have done to get this body going. But I'm concerned that the neutrality is trying to be stifled, and that will not help the process.
Well, you and I are going to disagree because I don't look at you all as neutral. I look at you all as part representing the community that we fought so hard to get you here. And all of you are our choices, but we didn't have a big choice in that. So we're looking to you to engage us and work together to set up this commission. This is
Okay.
not your commission, it's our commission.
May I ask you one question, please? So how is us giving you the opportunity to present your own written document stifling your ability to be part of the process?
I didn't say it was. I'm just asking, is that the only option that I have is to read this?
No, don't read it. Don't even read it.
No,
Make
I
your
gotta
own.
read it.
Well, read it later then. Make your own, give it to us, and then read this and see how they compare.
Go ahead, Munira.
Well, I would firstly like to say that I don't think that, I mean, what you might have meant to say might have been different than what people heard. I think that we
doubt
need.
it.
I mean, well, the important thing is impact over intent. So, I mean, you might have meant something and then somebody heard it a different way. And I mean, you might have meant it from the goodness of your heart, and it could have like hurt somebody or offended somebody.
Oh, absolutely.
And I just think that like that's something important that we need to recognize, is that like impact goes over intent. You can mean something and it can come off totally different. And I don't think, I didn't come here neutral. I came here, honestly, I really didn't know entirely what I was stepping into. But now that I'm here, I definitely think that I am here for like the community and the people here. I don't think, I think not every cop is bad, but the system is corrupt in general. And that we need to, I don't know, try and, I don't know, even the scales, I guess. And I am aware that like I came onto this task force having like just kind of, I was at neutral zone and somebody was like, hey, like Keyshawn couldn't do it. Do you want to be on the task force? And I was like, okay, sure, let's go. But now that I'm here, it's like I absolutely want to be a voice, like a mouthpiece for all of the community. I think that the police has, like their voices have been heard in a way that the community's voice hasn't. I think that happens too often. And I think that this task force, we have the opportunity to change something. And I definitely think that, you know, like I wasn't the one fighting for years. I didn't even find out about Aura Rosser's death until like a year later. But I was raised on the being told that the police have never been fair, and that the police have a very difficult relationship, even that they don't really even have a relationship with the Black community and with community members in general. I think that it's incredibly important for us to learn our history when we're on this task force. And I want to say, Shirley, it's not your job to educate us on it. You might want to, but it's not your job because you've been doing so much work that, like, I mean, I don't think you're going to take a break, but you deserve a break. I think that we do need to come together and learn our history of Ann Arbor, of the police with Ann Arbor. I think that that's important. You're right, a lot of us came here not knowing the history, and I think we need to learn it in order for this to work. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I mean, I appreciate that there are many people in the community who worked very hard to get to the point of this task force being appointed. Dwight who's on the task force is one. There are many people who are not. Ultimately, City Council created this task force with this membership, and we're the ones who are charged with the responsibility of making the proposal in a public process, which is an unusual thing to do for, I believe, for a governing document of this sort. But that's the choice that was made, and I understand that choice. But it was this task force that is charged with the responsibility of doing it, and it's not. It is not an open meeting of everybody who decides to come that is trying to decide. So I mean the notion of equality in the sense that well, we're all going to do it in a circle. I just don't think it works, and I don't think it's appropriate. I think that we have the responsibility of doing it. So, you know, I drafted what I did because I thought I was in a position to do something to get the thing moving. Now, I've got to say, I'm more than a little frustrated because for all the talk about, you know, are we listening and all that, we made what we call the skeleton document available, I think, May 3rd. May 17th, we made sure it was going to go up on the Facebook page. That skeleton document gave a pretty good sense of where we're going. We invited comments on that. I remember talking to Shirley about it afterwards. I said, please read that. She said, yeah, you know, if I have questions about it, can I call you? Of course. I've received from the community, I think a total of 0 comments on the skeleton, which had the substance of what I was of my thoughts. Anyway, of indicating where it might go. 0. Okay. I mean, Helen today gave a set of substantive comments, which I thought were constructive and useful. But I mean, anybody at any time is able to offer comments, and we, as Dick said, we will consider them. Now, I got to say, I mean, so far am I away from wanting to dominate the. I mean, frankly, my real preference at this point is I feel that I've performed a service by drafting for whatever use it will have. Every bone in my body is aching to say I performed my service and I'm gone. I cannot tell you how much I would like that to happen. Okay, and I'm thinking that maybe I should just walk out of the meetings to go out of the meetings so that there's an assurance that I'm not going to whatever. I've never had a problem with any committee I've chaired where I've drafted stuff. I've never had a problem with people telling me no, this has to be changed. You know, but I think we have the job, and I'm really happy to walk out. I really am. You know, I can't tell you how much happier my life would be. I'm not going. I don't think it's appropriate to say, well, it's anybody has comments, want to change, we'll take them, we'll consider them. But let's move ahead. We've met for 10 hours, I think, and I think we've had 1 hour we've talked about the commission, what the commission would look like.
Dick, then Anna.
We are a political body. We have been appointed by the city council in a political process. The mayor was involved, he's elected. Howard Lazarus is involved because he was appointed city administrator. And this is inherently a political process. The community, as you're framing it, is pushing us. And you should push us. You should push us as hard as you can to get the result that you want. The police are pushing us. When I talk to road officers and I ask them this question, how can the commission help you? You know what they say to me? It can't, because you are anti-police. You're all about disciplining and firing and changing, and you're not even police officers. We want nothing to do with you. I said, what if we had a listening session? And Howard Lazarus, the police chief, the deputy police chief said, you're welcome to go. We have no restrictions in you going. How many people would show up? I asked 3 police officers. They all told me none. And I said, why? We don't trust you. Okay, so we're in a situation here where one side says we're tools of the police, and the police say we're tools of the community. I say fine. That's the tension that brings about a decision that won't satisfy anyone. But this is a 40, 50, 60-year process. This is not going to solve any of the implicit biases, any of the difficulties overnight. Regardless, even if we said to the community, give us your template and we'll stamp it, and you've got it, what happens tomorrow? Are we now in the promised land? No, we're not. It's a process that we have to go through, but a process starts with a beginning. And it's not going to be perfect. It's just not going to be perfect. And so as we go along, in 5, 10 years, or as this commission goes along, hopefully with the right people, hopefully with the right information, it will begin to transform things. But I don't mind listening to everybody that's in this room and telling us why we're illegitimate, why we shouldn't be here. You have a right to say it. And we hear it. And then next week when you come up with an outline or a template, we're going to read it. And nobody's going to say, because you did it, we're not going to accept it. You'll see this when we go through this process. Do you think all of us are going to say, raise our hands, no questions, Rich, everything you put here is right? No. And you, yeah, and we invite you to do it either using this as a template, or as you point out, this is not a basis upon which we should embark. It's not transformational. Give us something that is, and we'll look at it. And so my view is that we're starting with mutual distrust. And I hear it. I hear it from this room, and I also hear it from the outside.
Let me just say, they're telling you that they don't have trust. But we don't have trust either. And you're telling us that we have to learn, that we have to come up with this trust in a matter of a month or two.
No.
Yes, you are.
No.
Yes, you are.
Oh, no.
And
I don't
everything
think,
that I've done that.
no, I didn't say
I want us to
that.
hurry up, meet, have listening sessions so you can meet this deadline, because the city is telling, you're listening to the city and the police more than you're listening to us. And that's a problem.
I do not think that the police or the community will trust whatever commission is established for years. You know why? You have to earn trust. You have to earn it. And we haven't earned it as a task force, and the commission obviously hasn't earned it because it hasn't been created. No matter what that commission is, it will not earn its trust until it demonstrates that it is there to try to improve the quality of life for all citizens in this community. And that's going to, with all due respect, it's going to take years, if not decades. So I'm not asking for trust. I think it's arrogant to ask someone, trust me. I have to earn it. And I haven't earned it with anybody in this room. And I understand why. And I'm not fighting that. There's many people in this room I don't trust because I don't know them. So trust is earned.
Anna?
I am both, am very much feeling how complicated all of this is, and am feeling upset that there's so much of what feels to be like an us and them conversation in a multitude of ways. And I'm just wondering if we could just, unless it seems like it is silencing parts of history or processes, I'm wondering if we could figure out what would feel okay. And so in terms of digging into some of the content so that we can as to the best of our ability, co-create a document that will be presented to City Council in September. And I know that we are feeling the pressure of that timeline, and I think that the structure of this document is meant to be a process for how we can do that. Nothing is set in stone in terms of the content in it. And the idea was that we would be able to look, my understanding is that tonight we can look at the content and we'll work through it piece by piece in dialogue with everyone. And then templates as they are presented, which I believe some may be presented next week at our next meeting. I would assume we will follow the same process, which is that we also may vote to adopt those templates also. And we will treat them with the same consideration that we have here. So it would feel to me, unless it feels otherwise to others, it would feel to me like we have a missed opportunity to not dig into some of that content together tonight, and versus waiting until we have 3 templates in front of us. I think that no matter what, we will have to have a conversation about the name of it and the mission of it, and that is what we are even starting with tonight. So I'm wondering if that feels okay to community members, if we can start there. And we're not voting on anything. We can even look at it as like, it really is open to everything and all ideas and brainstorm.
Lori? Yeah, Munir?
I can see why literally everybody is frustrated. I mean, honestly, I am a little frustrated too. And partially just because, like, from what I feel like I'm hearing, it's like, literally, I can get why the community is upset, because it does kind of sound like you're telling them to step back and, like, let us do this. And I don't think that we're equipped to do it. Like, this group of people right here, I don't think we're equipped to do it because we don't know the history. We weren't fighting for this. Like, we weren't the ones that were doing the work to get this formed.
Manera, can I just ask you to please not make that assumption that everybody here doesn't know? Please don't. That's inappropriate. And don't take it, it's not, it's meant in a way to help you grow. It's not, because I am well aware, I work in a law office, I'm well aware of the entire incident and some of the things that they've been doing to get this going. And I suspect other people are as well, yeah.
Can I ask how many people here were the ones doing it?
Doing what?
Pushing for this? How many?
I
Yeah.
was. I was one of the people who pushed.
How
for
many
it.
people on this task force were the ones doing it?
From jump, baby, from jump.
Right,
That's
exactly.
Jump.
2 people?
So, Munira,
I consulted.
how do you feel about what Anna proposed?
I agree with what Anna proposed.
Okay, so would you be willing to allow us all to start digging in?
Yeah, just 1 second. I also want to say, like, the whole thing about, like, the police not having trust in this task force, that personally kind of, like, makes me feel uneasy, because what I'm hearing is somebody who has power and privilege saying that they don't feel trusted because they have power and privilege. I want, more than anything, the police to know that we're not anti-police, anti-governing. I just want them to stop arresting us and harassing us and killing us. And that is really why I'm here, is that I want to build a relationship between the police and youth members and members of the community more than anything, and I think that that's incredibly important. That's all.
I think we could all vote for that.
And I have a
Yeah.
process question. I think
Okay.
it probably will have to go to Howard. Howard, you talked about whether or not this goes through by resolution or ordinance. And as an attorney, they have different meanings to me. I'm wondering if everyone in the audience understands what that is and the difference that if we vote one way or the other, or is that something that will happen once you have it and you've done your rewrite work, whatever, and present it to City Council?
If I could start, the commitment I've made to the co-chairs is when the document's finalized or in its draft final stage, hopefully we'll be able to discuss it. But whatever comes out of that, whether I agree with something or not, I'm going to present the recommendations of the task force to council with a discussion of whether I agree with it or not, but I'm not going to filter and I'm not going to change the recommendations.
Okay,
and then
good.
council will have the opportunity to consider how they want to go forward. The process of adopting by resolution or ordinance is significant in a couple of ways. Resolutions are adopted by council, one reading, generally speaking. It's not incorporated into the city code. It's still, we who are subject to that resolution still have to comply. It is easier to modify a resolution than it is an ordinance. City's process for passing an ordinance requires 2 readings. The city's practice, although not necessarily always required, is to have a public hearing to approve an ordinance and subsequently to approve changes to that ordinance. The reason you may want to go through that process is it's in the city's code of ordinances. In effect, it's law. There are other commissions that are established by ordinance, the Environmental Commission as an example. So that's a choice that you make, looking down the road, weighing the freedom you have to be a little more free form with a resolution as opposed to something that has to be structured. And I think we'll all accept that it is very difficult to capture ideas, particularly competing ideas, in a structure that becomes law, but nevertheless, that's what you are charged to do. And it's not always easy, and it's not always kind, but that's what the charge that you've taken on, and you see that you're in harm's way. But the decision to go resolution or ordinance is yours,
It's ours.
and I personally do not have a preference. I'm just laying out what the differences are to you as to whether you want to go.
Yeah.
It's not a decision we have to make now,
Right.
and ultimately it's a decision city council would make.
yeah.
But if I could though,
Yeah.
and the reason why
Wait, Sam.
the reason why having a structure is important is if you are going to present this as an ordinance, it has to follow a certain format so it gets incorporated. And just because you have a format doesn't dictate the ideas that are in that format.
Okay.
So,
And Rich, you have that
Yeah.
format?
I'll get it. I mean, the format itself is easy enough. I just, actually, I don't know if you can see it, but there are a bunch of boards and commissions that are part of the city code of ordinances. And and as I say, it's not something that we have to decide right now, but I would think we'd want this to be an ordinance. Okay, so we take another meeting, we have a public hearing, okay, this is a big deal. And I would think that we would want it not to be amended as easily as a resolution, particularly if, for example, the document, whatever it is, has something guaranteeing funding for the commission. You don't want the city council in its budget to say, oh, yeah, we're amending that. You'd want them to have to go through the ordinance amendment provision. So, as I say, we don't have to resolve it now. Howard just raised this afternoon, and my reaction was, I think we do want it to be an ordinance.
I'd like to suggest that we end the discussion on ordinance or resolution at this time, because it's not relevant to this meeting's agenda, and that we write a clear explanation that is easy for anyone to understand who does not have a legal background about the differences, so that it can be weighed by everyone.
That would be awesome.
Is that okay to
That's
do?
perfect.
And then we can make that public.
That's great, thank you.
All right, so let's proceed and begin with the name of this commission.
Is that cool with folks if we do that? I feel like I proposed it, but yeah, thumbs up or whatever, like generally okay?
Could you also like provide a template of what the ordinance is supposed to have in it?
You mean,
Or like,
sure, publicly, is that what you mean?
Right, like,
So, like the-
like whatever this format is.
Yeah, like
it's
whatever
supposed to
Rich finds online.
Have
Yeah.
exactly what it's supposed
Yep.
to have.
Absolutely.
Say what that is.
Yep, great question. Sam, you have a question or comment?
Yes, I just wanted to react to, I can't read the youth members, my site's very.
Manera. Am I saying it
What is it again?
right? Manera.
Nero.
Manera.
I just want, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all employees of the city, and especially the police, are not forced to continue to be employed by the city. And if any of them want to, and if any of them don't respect democracy and don't respect the people of Ann Arbor, I would like to encourage anyone where that's the case to resign immediately, especially the police. If there's any police officers that don't feel comfortable working for the city of Ann Arbor, I would encourage them to resign, and I would wish them a good life.
Okay,
But
thank
they're not
you,
forced
Sam.
to like stay. I mean, I'm not wrong. They're allowed to resign.
Sam,
Thank you.
that's a topic for another time.
Thank you. Well, it's a topic for today because
What,
I made a
Dakota?
comment. But thank you. Thank you for telling me what to say. I
I
appreciate
wanted
it.
to make two observations. I feel like the point I made before about your short timeline has been lost, because a lot of this discussion, if it keeps going like this, I really don't see you reaching any conclusion, because a lot of the people on this task force, and I want to say I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I have done a lot of public service, and it is thankless. People don't get it. You're representing us because we voted for our representatives and they appointed you. And each of you had skills that were recognized as valuable to this process. And I appreciate you being on this task force. But what I am afraid of is that we're going to run this into the ground to the point where you will reach no conclusion, which would really, really, really be disappointing. We do not want this process to where he's saying he might want to quit. Other people are frustrated that I've heard privately, and the process is just going around in circles. Of course there's been pain and hurt. That is not going to go away. We have a lot of things that have occurred, but that's not what this task force is for. This task force is to put something forward that we can get the city and the police to agree that they can be made accountable to something. And for you to put all this time in during the summer months and come up with nothing would be really, really, really disappointing. So I hope that you know that you're appreciated, because some people can't be here to tell you so, but this job should get done. This should not be dragged out to the point where we get nothing. That would be the most frustrating thing of all. I don't care what you consider. I just hope whatever you consider, you have something to put forward at the end of your efforts.
We will.
Okay, we hear ya. So, Article 1, the name. This ordinance creates the Independent Police Oversight Commission, hereinafter referred to as the Commission for the City of Ann Arbor. Independent Police Oversight Commission is the space holder for the name. Task Force, comments? Dick?
I think that there are many of us that want this to be independent. But being independent depends upon what power you have. If you don't have the appropriate powers, then you can't be independent. I also would prefer it be a community oversight commission rather than a police oversight commission, in emphasizing the community. And therefore, from my standpoint, I would want to revisit independence based on what powers we end up giving to the commission. I think it's a premature discussion.
To talk about the name or to
Talk about the
choose independent?
No, I think that many of us want independence. It's in the eye of the beholder. We have to sort of look at what that means to everyone. But if we cannot if the commission can't have the appropriate tools to be independent, then I don't want to mislead people by saying we are.
Okay.
I totally agree
So you're
with that.
proposing that we not discuss the name at this time and we move on to mission?
Well, I would, but I mean, I'm not about to shut down discussion.
No,
I'm telling
just-
you, my own
Right.
view is that
Okay.
I would reserve my own consensus to this until I find out what it is we're prepared to do to give us independence.
Other? Yes, Rich?
I agree. We shouldn't spend a whole lot of time unless there was sort of instant agreement on a name. Helen suggested community rather than independent. Independent might be composed of professionals, which is an interesting point. Although I think if you look at the commission, you'd see that it's not. So I like the use of the term independent just to stress that. But let's put it off. I agree. We can see at the end what we think, or at some later time. Yeah, it's not worth spending a lot of time on now.
Okay, let's not waste time
Yeah.
deciding this. Do
Yeah.
we want to move on to mission?
Move on.
I'm there.
All right. Is that okay with those in attendance? That we focus on mission? Okay.
Yeah, can we just do a quick little cheesy process voting thing for the task force also, Lori?
Yeah.
Which is that we get a general temperature check of what folks are feeling, and so if we feel like it's good, or we have a question or we disagree, we can just do it with our thumbs. It'll help speed up our process, and then it also helps to see what people are thinking. And that's also to community if folks want to do that.
Okay. Everybody got the thumb code? Up means yes.
Thank you.
Sideways means a question, and down means
Disagree.
disagree. Okay, mission. You've all got it in front of you. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points about why the commission is created. Or the purpose. The commission is created to serve the purposes of this ordinance as follows. Am I needed to read it out loud?
No. I mean, I think
Okay.
we all have it.
Yes, everybody here has it, but it's,
What if we go
Is it-
section by section? Yeah, go ahead.
I have an overall point, and is the verbs that are being used. They are to ensure, to foster, to minimize, to enable, to provide. And the verbs, the two verbs, to ensure, again comes back to it can't be our mission to ensure unless we have the power to ensure. And so on those two, although I agree with the content of that being an appropriate mission, the promise that we're making remains to be seen depending on the powers that we decide to give the commission.
I disagree with that. It's my mission to ensure my children and my grandchildren's lives, but do I have the power to do it when anybody can come who wants to? I have no trouble with using ensure. What my mission is what I want to come into being. But can I be prevented? If a president of the United States can be assassinated, I can be prevented.
What, Dwight, just to help me, can you reflect what you heard Dick say? What his objection to ensure
He
is?
said that if we can't guarantee it, we may be misleading people. Is that right?
I didn't use the word guarantee. I said if we can't ensure it. And this to me, the powers that we give the commission and the composition are the two most important things to me.
If I want to use a mealy-mouthed word, why am I on the commission?
Well, then why aren't we using, and I'm not trying to...
Do you have another one that might be better?
No, I don't. I don't. But if ensure works, it should work for every one of them. It should work. We should not use foster, minimize, enable, or provide. We should ensure.
Okay.
Right? And I would agree with you.
I can live with that.
Yeah, and I would agree with you.
But the mission is the goals that we have. That's what I want to make sure that we understand. It doesn't mean that we can guarantee that we can carry it out.
So it's aspirational.
Aspirational, always.
Okay.
Life is aspirational.
Okay.
So we could then write to ensure better communication, to minimize the extent to which the AAPD receives service calls. It sounds like that one, under this kind of thinking, would have to be eliminated.
Which number are you on?
Right.
Which number are you on?
That would be to ensure the police department treats all persons properly.
Is it B, C, D? What?
The fourth one is to minimize them.
D? Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure everybody's on the
Yeah.
same page.
So I've got, so the top is mission, and then maintains a high standard of policing is number 1, treats all persons properly, number 2, foster better communication is something I could see changing to ensure better communication. I mean, in the sort of idealistic thinking, a mission is the best, our best selves. And then to minimize the extent to which, I mean, we can't guarantee that and we don't really have control over it. We have a good guess about how we could educate people. We might create ordinances that fine people, but we really don't have a good enough hold on that. That would probably have to be eliminated. And then to enable the community to have an effective voice, I mean, I think we could say to ensure it in that kind of thinking. So if we wanted to think idealistic, like lots of missions are written, to ensure a procedure for independent review of particular incidents, I feel like that's kind of what the whole deal is about.
Yeah, Dick?
I didn't. Well, after
And so I would say I would support moving everything to ensure, with the thinking that the goals are ideal in a mission.
The way you framed it, Dwight, that missions are aspirational, then I couldn't agree with you more. And that the strongest verbs ought to be used. And I think that no one would disagree in that way, that those are the goals. Yeah.
Yes?
Can I suggest, if we're going to go in that direction, I'm inclined to think the only one that we might want to change is foster, because to minimize, that's aspirational. To enable is aspirational. To provide a procedure, I don't think we need to use the word ensure if we're saying to provide. We could say to ensure better communications, if we so choose. I mean, I use different verbs there because I thought there were different things happening. But I don't think it would be good to change them all. It'd make it awkward to change them all to ensure, I think. But that's a suggestion.
No, I mean, I think what you're saying is sort of more of an analytical approach to it. Like, is this possible to guarantee it? And that's back to Dick's argument, and that is an analytical, that's an analysis based on what we think is actually possible and sort of a scientific mindset. But what I think Dwight is describing is an ideal mindset, and I think that captures some of the conversations. We're going to make this be the best thing we can do.
Well, I understand, but I'm just saying that the last three I thought sort of did that already, to minimize, to enable, to provide. It seems to me that those are doing those things. Foster maybe is weaker.
So it sounds like this is an area that bears deeper discussion.
Yeah.
Is that right?
One question I have is whether these 6 bullets really reflect the mission as a whole that we would want. I'm not talking about the words. I'm talking about the mission.
So we're moving from talking about ideal plans to maybe the content. You're talking about the content now. Okay, different subject. Sounds good.
Can I take I'll take as a friendly amendment 2 of Helen's suggestions, which I don't think, as far as I'm concerned, they're fine. I had with minimal use of, I had without undue use of force, and she suggested with minimal use of force.
May I speak to my own?
Oh, sure, of course. Yeah. Well, I thought, the chair says okay.
Thank you. For the first bullet point, to ensure, I prefer this wording, to ensure the improvement of the Ann Arbor police force so that everyone in the Ann Arbor community may live safely and experience fair and equal treatment. I was uneasy with ensuring that the city maintains a high standard of policing, since everything I've heard at these meetings indicates that there are portions of the community that don't experience that high standard of policing. So the point is improvement here, at least in my view, and that I would want to highlight fair and equal treatment in 2 places, both in the first bullet point and in the second bullet point. Can I go on to the second one then?
Absolutely.
All right. So I would say to ensure that the Ann Arbor Police Department treats all people respectfully and with minimal use of force, rather than without undue use of force, because it seems to me that the police generally, I'm not talking specifically now about Ann Arbor Police, but police nationally get to define what is undue use of force and what, is not. So I would say minimal use of force there. And then finally, let's see. Well, in the third one, in the final line, or the line before the final line, and how it must operate to perform its function, that is suggesting that the police would then explain, well, we have to do it this way, and you must understand that. And the whole point of this is to change the way the police acts. And so instead of saying how it must operate, say just simply how it performs its functions. That's the purpose of communicating this. This is what we do, not what we must do. That's the substance of my objections to this 1.2.
Oh, I thought you done.
That's it for the mission. For the mission.
Yes, Richard?
So, yeah, I'm fine with all of those. I had some hesitation about the first because, look, I do think that we have to be neutral in the sense of not, as not cheerleaders for the police, not castigating the police either. But I think that language, I read it, there's nobody who doesn't want improvement of the police. And there's certainly people who don't experience fair treatment, at least in the subjective sense. So I'm okay with each of those. Minimal use of force, yeah. Minimal, I mean, who wants more? I mean, it has to be used at times. And I appreciate the last thing, how it performs its functions. Yeah. So I'm okay with all of those.
Are there other comments? Hold on, Shirley. Lauren?
Oh, I was just
No. Go.
Shirley,
Would you mind coming forward, because I don't think that the recording can pick up voices if you're not close.
I have a suggestion,
Okay?
if I can. This document that we're going over, and on B where it says to ensure that the Ann Arbor Police Department and la-da-da-da-da, and then that are vulnerable to segments of the community that are vulnerable and have been marginalized, such as persons of color, youth, immigrants, low-income people, those who suffer from mental illness, and transgender persons. My suggestion to this task force, and to you, Rich, I understand you are a lawyer, or you teach law,
Both.
and I think at one of the, maybe the second session that we had, or meeting we had, maybe you could write this so that we all can understand it in lay terms, and then when you present it to the city or city council or Mr. Lazarus, you can flower it up like this with all this legal terminology. But for us to, let me speak for me. For me to understand what you're talking about is very difficult because I'm not a lawyer. So I got to look at this and go back over it because I don't know all your terminology as a lawyer. And I had asked once before that when you write, since you're writing these documents on your own, that you write it so that the community has no problem, all of us, has no problem reading it and interpreting. Is that a big problem?
Yes.
Why?
I mean, it's a problem in the sense that what we have to do, beyond anything else, is draft the charter of the commission, which is a legal document. Now, I want to be clear about one thing also, because the ordinance, the resolution said to propose, that we should propose, and I believe that it's important that we propose a full charter, not just sort of a one-page summary and then say city attorney draft from there. So we have to draft a legal document. That's our task. That's our job. I have made it as accessible as I can, but it has to deal with a great deal of detail, and it's got to deal with a great deal of, it's got to do so with precision. Otherwise, it doesn't do any good. That's what we have to accomplish. Now, you'll recall, I said I'd be happy to talk about the skeleton with you. I mean, I can summarize if there are particular problems that you have. I'd rather not do it in meeting time. I'm happy to
Insert
talk.
something?
Yeah.
So Shirley, tell me if I'm hearing you correctly. Are you saying that this language is problematic, but you want to understand and be comfortable with the content of it? And is there a way to provide the public a version that makes the content clear, that is parallel to this language?
Yes and no, but I can accept that. You could parallel it, but I'm just, what I was trying to say is that however you do it, you need to have a document that all of us can read and understand so that we can communicate with you and understand what we're communicating to. And then when you do your legal document that you have to present
to city council and the city manager and the city attorney and the police chief. Then you put in your legal wording. But for us, for me, as a person in this community, to be able to go back and forth with you and engage in this, I've got to be able to understand what I'm reading. And I'm not a lawyer, Rich.
I understand that, sure.
And I know that you can write this because I've worked in legal offices, and that was one of the things that we talked about, that lawyers write so that their clients can understand what they're talking about when they're representing them. So since you're representing the community, I would like to be able to understand what you're writing.
And that actually is maybe a suggestion for the commission as well, is when the commission comes up with policies or things like that, to have a document that works the language of the city, and then a supplemental document that explains that in, very clear, understandable language to the community, so that there can be, and that the community knows what the commission is committing to.
So I'll just say there's no particular legal jargon here. I really there isn't. I just used words, but
Don't be defensive.
Let's rest with what Shirley's saying. Is there anyone on the commission who would like to work on that supplementary? Anyone else?
If we all take a little piece, we can do it. And in fact, we actually, Shirley, I'm glad you brought it up. Lori and I have had this discussion several weeks ago that we needed to translate Rich's document so that it could be understood. So you're bringing up something that's already been on our radar, that we simply have not had enough individual time to do it because, as you can see, it's complicated. But it does need to be written like that first so that we know what we're translating and we can give you the best translation. So the timing is not working very well.
We need to do it quickly, and we need to make it public.
So if we all throw in and grab a paragraph.
We can't have one person doing that because it's going to take a while.
Yep, I
So
just
do
said
we
I'd
have
take a
4
piece.
people who would do it? I'll do a part. Lauren will do a part. Okay, we have 4 people.
Before Shirley leaves, in support of what she said, people in our society don't always understand that we need to translate things. Almost everything, that may be an overstatement. I grew up in a project, so many of the things that I say, I'm translating even before I can even speak. This is not my natural language. If I try to use this language at home, people would think I had lost my complete mind. So what she is saying is not unreasonable. It's simply that we need other people to also lean into discomfort like we have to do every moment of our lives. So, is that fair?
That's Thank you. Okay. Back to the question. Yeah.
Sorry, to the question? Or
No,
just to
no,
the
go
concept?
ahead.
I just had a few comments. So under the first bullet point, I was just thinking about how we've talked about how the Ann Arbor, how communities can be transient, and actually not everyone is a part of the Ann Arbor community who experiences policing from the Ann Arbor Police Department. So I was just thinking that an easy edit might be all persons in the Ann Arbor area, Ann Arbor area may live safely and thrive, or something. It's like we have both persons, but also location in that. And I think it should just be focused on, or just all persons who experience policing or something. Also, police aren't fully responsible for us all living safely and thriving. Yeah. So anyway, there was just some disconnect in that sentence for me in terms of either broadening it or being more specific.
And just for clarification, are you wanting to include people who are not necessarily living in the community, but work in the community, pass through the community?
So yeah,
use the community.
Yeah, so this is about the quality of policing, and the police department does not just impact Ann Arbor residents. So whoever the Ann Arbor Police Department interacts with, that is who I think should be listed here. And I agree in terms of the commentary earlier. Helen, is that your name? Just in terms of what high standard of policing looks like, and maybe we can define those things, and cite what that means to us, because I bet there's different definitions for that.
So when you say define it and cite it, are you referring to the supplementary report that will provide, that goes along with this draft, that would then elaborate, make a reference to what high standard of policing means?
Sure, yes, if we feel like that's a good place for it.
Okay. Yeah, Helen?
Well, it would seem to me that would be important to have it in both versions. You know, if you're gonna elaborate what a high standard of policing looks like, that seems to be of central importance, and it ought to go into the legalistic document as well as being translated.
Well, sorry. So just to be clear, the supplemental document that Lori is referring to is not the conversation that we just had with Shirley about having two different types of documents.
What is
So did you share earlier, Lori, or no? I'm happy to share.
Probably not. Go ahead.
Okay. So a supplemental document that we're thinking about in addition to this, so the like legal actual ordinance, which I'm hoping it is, but ordinance or resolution, whatever, we all decide. In addition to it, we have been talking about wanting a supplemental document that'll include a lot of the research that we've been doing, or the framing of what this context is. Because a lot of this still doesn't actually encompass a lot of the conversations that we've had. People have done certain research on training, people have done certain research on restorative practices in policing, and so it would be a document where we can include that, because that's work that's been done. And also, it would allow for us to frame what does standard of policing look like for the task force as it relates to this. If you are making an argument that you think for sure it should be in here, you know, like that it needs to be a part of the mission, then that's great, and we can have that conversation. But just to describe that supplemental document is meant to be context that adds what did, you know, the essence of what we mean in this, not just the legal document itself.
So if I could, I'd like to say that this conversation at this point has highlighted high standard of policing as something that needs to be further explained and developed. It highlights that we want to include others who are impacted by police or interact with police beyond those who just live in Ann Arbor. And so what we're doing from this discussion is bringing out the things that we all want to work further on and think about.
Yes.
Is that correct in everyone's mind?
And I think we're also agreeing to the recommendations that she said.
Right. As far as this supplemental report, I'd like to add to Anna's explanation that the draft for an ordinance is a legal document. There's a lot of thought and research and commentary that we have gotten from the public that is the basis for what is written in the legal document. And we want to be sure, that report does not exist yet, but we want to be sure that when it's given to Mr. Lazarus and when it's given to council and when it's given to the commission, that report helps whoever is on that commission to understand all the thinking that we have had behind what is in the ordinance. I don't think that makes sense without giving an explanation. So, an example. And so, maybe we can use this first bullet point about high standard of policing, and we can cite what is nationally viewed as a high standard, what Ann Arbor sees as a high standard, what the community sees as a high standard. We can give additional information that makes it a fuller, we're passing on something to the commission to do an incredibly challenging, difficult job. And we want to give them as much of the benefit of what we've learned and come to understand and what we've been given by the community and been given by the police so that they have that at their disposal. It doesn't it doesn't dictate them, but it gives them more of a starting place than starting from scratch. I wasn't prepared to explain it. Can anybody else help? That report does not exist, but as we compile it, and Anna Lemler is going to take on the responsibility to receive everyone's contributions to it, then it will grow and it will be kept public. And so just like the template, the report is going to evolve and grow, and it's going to correspond to what is in the template. Does the task force have any more to say about the mission as written here at this time? Because we can always come back to it. Okay, can we hear more from the people in attendance about the mission? And if you would, come up here so that you're on the mic and recorded.
So Ryan Hughes. About the high standard of policing, and then in C it talks about what the police department needs to perform its function. So this commission is going to have a mission statement, but I don't think the police actually has a mission statement. It's just kind of in the charter. It's just like, yeah, there's going to be a police, and it's like, what are the police for? And so I think one thing might be to like put in a section here of like a vision, like this is what we think the police are for. This is what we are trying, this is why the city's decided to have police. I don't know, maybe this isn't the right place of why the city has decided to have police, but like, this is what the commission thinks police are for. And yeah.
So your comment is about the absence of a mission statement by the police department.
Right, because it's
Okay.
like, what makes a high standard of policing, it depends on what we think the goal of a police department actually is.
Okay. Anything else?
That's what I got.
All right. Others? No one else at this time.
My name's Judy Von Wenzel. For 10 years or more, I've been a student at Washtenaw Community College because I was over 65 and I could go take a lot of classes. For one thing, since I've been a student there was a controversy because the police are trained at the school that I am going to. And the controversy was because the African American figures that the police target practice with were African American, figures instead of, something that was more. Anyway, it seems that the training was extremely biased. And I think that I want to say that I want the police officers in my community, not to say that I necessarily want any police officers, but if they're there, I want them to have a whole lot of training. I mean, if they were trained every single day, I don't think that would be too much, because our society is constantly putting out that idea that the people who commit crimes have darker skin and the people who are the victims have lighter skin. And this is so wrong, and I want training to be a very, very big part of what my police get. I'm not saying that all police officers are extremely biased, but our whole society is extremely biased. And so people who go into the community to help, or we hope they're there to help, are needing a ton of training. And that's my main point, is that it's not, oh, the police have can make their own decision as to whether they want training. I've heard that in the last 5 years. Somebody said, well, the police can decide whether they want training or not. But, and I'm not talking about the people in charge, but the people who are actually out on the street can decide whether they're going to have training. And that
Okay.
seems so, you know.
There is some mention about training in
Yes,
the
so
document.
I am for maximum
Okay,
training.
thank
you
you.
so much.
Can we move to the independence part of this article, which is 1.3? Does everyone see this? It's a very important component. Everybody on the same page? Comments?
Just acknowledging him.
I have a question. The issue with most boards is the staff is directly reportable to the administrator, or at least through a chain of command. How can the police board make it so that their staff are not reportable to anybody? It's kind of a tricky, just like flowchart issue, or how that works.
Can I respond to that? In Article 4 of the draft, there is something about staff of the commission. I do think that's a valid concern, and I think and on the task force we've had some of those feelings as well. Can I talk for a minute just about the independence, because I know Howard has said that he doesn't think this commission is different from others, but and the city attorney has also, I think, resisted the use of the word independent. Many of these bodies do have independent actually in the title, and they're all created by the city, by the respective cities. So we understand this is created by the city. But what independent, why I think this commission is different is because most commissions are effectively meant to assist city council in doing its work, and it's like the city council doesn't have time to do this. This commission, as I see it, is something else. It's meant to be a countervailing body to the exercise of power. And that's what's crucially different about this. And in order to have credibility with the community, I think it's got to have what I call functional independence, which means in part having its own staff. To the extent necessary, I mean, the city could provide logistical support. It means, in part, having independent counsel. It means being able to control its own communications. I think that's all really important.
So do you think that needs to be outlined?
Well, it is
under
all
this
later
statement?
on in the,
Oh, okay.
What I said in my commentary was, I don't think this portion is essential in the sense that this goes back to the comment that Dick made, that, it is what it is. The thing is going to be what it is. If we provide independent powers, it'll be independent. But I think it's useful to stress that this is a different kind of animal and that it's meant to be independent. So I'm hoping the task force goes along with that, and I'm hoping ultimately the city council does.
So Rich, you used the term countervailing body to the exercise of power.
Yeah.
Can you say that a different
in
way?
A different way, yeah. Okay. So you've got the police department under the police chief, who reports to the city administrator, who reports to city council. That's the hierarchy of power, if you will, the structure of power. And I think the reason why there has been the desire for this commission has been to say, even though the city council is a civilian body ultimately in control, but there should be something outside that structure that gets to comment on and to examine policing and make recommendations, and to be heard and to demand, to expect responses. That's what the nature of this commission is as I understand it, and it's got to be understood to be something separate. If it's under the control of the police chief, it doesn't do any good. If it's under the control of the city administrator, it doesn't do any good. So that's
Thank you.
what I had in mind.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then why are you writing the mission statement for the commission? Why isn't, why when the commission gets set up, they don't write their own? How come, since they're gonna be the ones that's dealing with all of this, why is this task force writing a mission statement for this body that's being set up?
Okay, it's a good and interesting question. I mean, I think the commission presumably would elaborate on it, but I think it's useful when you're setting up a body and giving it powers and saying we want you to do something, to give, at least in broad general outlines, what it is that we're hoping you achieve. That's it. I mean, it's so that the commission asks, when they ask why have we been put here, they know.
Yes, Dick.
I think that independence, in part, is whether or not we will have an independent budget, and do we have to go to the city each time the commission needs a dime and ask for it, so that the budget is one that the commission controls.
I forgot to mention.
Whether the staff that is utilized reports to the city or reports to the commission, whether reports will be censored before they are made, or whether the commission has the right to write its own report. Whether it's accepted or not is a different question than whether or not there are parameters or it has to go through a pre-screening before it becomes public. The receiving complaints and being able to, in an independent way, consider them. These are all indications of independence. And so I think that there will be aspects of that independence that we will all fight for. And the level of that independence will depend upon how much power we recommend, but of equal importance, how much power the city will allow the commission to have. I happen to believe that the city is an institution like all institutions. I'm not singling out the city as a unique institution, because it is an institution. Institutions don't give up power easily. That's just the fact of the matter, is that because you think you're doing the right job, you think you can self-correct, and you think you have some insight to make yourself better. And therefore there's resistance by and large. That, I think, is why it took so long to set up this commission, is that difficulty. And this is the first step where City Council is going to have to own up to, do they want something other than the existing structures to look at something that is adversely affecting the community? And that's what the process, I think, that we're involved with.
Yes.
I was just, this part of this is jumping ahead, but it's also pertaining to this. I think if we're going to say this, and clearly it's probably one of the most important aspects, then I question that we have the mayor and the city council involved in selecting members, which I know is part of this draft. So my concern about saying, you know, this is independent, but then saying the mayor and the city council get to select members, that seems contradictory to me. So in regards to this clause, I just wanted to kind of point that out at the later clause.
Sam's had his hand raised, and Lori, I think it's...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thanks. I just was kind of thinking about your point, Lauren. I think it'd be great if the city, I mean, I know very little about Detroit's police board, but those are elected positions. And I think it would be great if the task force thought outside of the purview of what you've been tasked with. I mean, it's good to have a set of selections to bring to council that they can enact. And I don't think anyone's going to stop you if you decide to make recommendations to council to change the charter to be put to the voters, because that's something that we have the power to do, and we have a couple lawyers here who can tell us what's within state law, and you can recommend that something be put to the voters, and we can vote to have a nice new park, and we can vote to have a nice new police board.
Yeah.
So selection is something that we'll deal with later, and Lori and I have thought that it would be better to put that off towards the end. It's a big topic, and it's going to require a lot of discussion. I'll just say there are a lot of counterpart bodies, bodies like this around the nation that are called independent, that have more or less actual independence, in which the selection is made by, in most cases, it's made by city officials one way or the other. And I should say another protection of independence, even if we do wind up with, selection by mayor and city council, whoever the selection is, another protection is term protection. In other words, that they can't be easily removed. So, however they get on, they can't be easily removed. So that's one of the.
Seems to be equal actual examples where the city and mayor, well, maybe not equal, but
No,
like Kalamazoo, for example, right? That they're all representatives of community organizations.
No, they're appointed by the city administrator. Half of them are supposed to be from a certain type of organization.
Well, not in Kalamazoo, based on the research that you're.
Yes, in Kalamazoo, they're appointed by the city administrator. 6 of the 12 are supposed to be from diverse organizations. As of now, only 4 actually are, but they're all appointed by the city administrator.
Okay. But I guess I have concerns
But
that
we'll talk about
calling
that
it
later.
independent from the city and then having
Yeah,
the city
well,
elect the
I
members
understand.
seems contradictory.
Yeah.
So that's what it
Yeah.
applies to this clause for me personally, is that, can we say that if we have the city involved in selecting members? So that's why I question this one phrase here.
So I want to be very clear that what I said was taken out of context. When I said use the word independent, I think what I said is you need to be very clear as to what its definition and meaning is. And also, when we talked about the title of this commission, I referenced what the council called it, and that you need to, again, define the terms you use so as not to create false expectations. So just to set the record straight, that's what I said. I have no objection to the word independent as long as you are clear as to what you mean by that.
Yeah.
The second thing I will take a little bit of offense to is we do not censor reports from any of the commissions. All commissions to that extent are independent. The fact that we provide administrative support is an enabling tool. We don't censor what comes out of the Human Rights Commission. We don't censor or rewrite reports that come out of any commission. We do provide advice with the city attorney as to what the rules are governing public bodies in the state of Michigan and what's required under city code and by council resolution. And those are important facts. So as you go through and set expectations for our community, you need to be very clear as to what certain terms mean.
What are you taking offense to?
Well, I just want to be very clear as to what I said, and we do not censor. There was an implication that we do that. You did.
I said that a sign of independence is when you're not censored. That's exactly what I said. The question was, what does it mean to be independent? We get a budget. We can't tell the city that we need $60 million because we're independent. We're dependent on the city for a budget. But a sign of independence is the recommendations and reports are not censored.
And they aren't.
I agree with you.
Okay. The other aspect of budgeting, just to set that, this is the only commission where we have provided a budget in FY19. It can't be unlimited. We have no unlimited resources. The city charter has rules about procurement of those resources that you're not going to be exempt from either. So when we talk, and as I said early on, is if the task force is going to recommend changes that require changes to the city charter, those have to be voted on, and those are things that will have to be phased in if that's what if that goes to a vote of the public. So as you look at those kind of changes that you may recommend, and if council adopts them, they cannot be implemented right away because you won't vote on them at least for another year and a half in a November election. So those are things that you need to keep in mind.
And I just wanted to add one more thing. Just in general, as we think about this, I think the examples from other states are very helpful and very informative, and also to start maybe thinking about ways that we could do it better or differently, you know. And so, yeah, you're probably, I hear you, that all these commissions have that kind of, you know, mayoral selection or city selection, but, you know, part of, I think, what we want to be thinking about, and also what we're hearing we should be thinking about, is like, okay, well, how can we up-level that?
Absolutely, yes,
Yeah.
we can do whatever we think makes sense. I was just saying that
Sure.
you mentioned Kalamazoo, and in fact, they're
Sure,
appointed by
got
city
it.
council.
Yeah.
Okay, so
We're at 9 o'clock, and we did not discuss the last point, the nature of the commission, but the content of that is very relevant to some of the discussion that's just taken place. So do we choose to continue and talk about this collectively before we adjourn?
I would like to suggest that because of the ideas that got brought up, which are complicated, and the community has expressed that they feel like they need a little bit more time, and maybe this would be an opportunity in the interim for us all to take our pieces and write a little bit more in lay terms so that they could be digested by even more people, and table it for the next meeting.
Well,
We're
is that
clearly
a,
not going to go through all of this today.
Yeah. Second?
No.
Second? Oh, Lauren, I saw a thumbs up. That's a second.
One of the difficult things about what we're trying to do is that it's like if you tell someone to describe everything in a room, you can start at the north, the east, the south, or the west, but you just said everything in the room. And we're jumping all over creation because we're trying to describe everything in this daggone room. And so many times when we're on a particular article, it's further on. And as a result of that, we've been spinning our wheels a lot more than I would like to see us do. The concern as to whether or not we're going to be able to complete all of this in good order is a well-considered concern, because we cannot continue to go as slowly as we are and think that we're going to finish this. I also want to encourage everybody who is sitting on this task force to understand that we cannot be defensive about what we are trying to do. We are in this together as a community, and when folk disagree, they disagree. The truth of the matter is, probably I am not the only one that disagrees with things that have been written, and I am so grateful to you for having put this template together. But as the blues man once said, I got two minds that say leave here and only one that say stay. So I'm divided with a lot of things. I'm looking for clarity. I want clarity. When we talk about being independent, there are some things there's no way we're going to be independent. But the whole idea of the commission having a budget is crucial. We've never been censored, as Howard said, on the Human Rights Commission, but we also never had a budget. So when I did research, I had to pay out of my own pocket to go to California, to go to New York, to go to Kansas. The independence was my independent income, or mine and my wife's. We don't want that for this commission. I've said more than I wanted to, but there it is.
okay, well, we're going to table going any further. Are there any final comments that any of you all who are in attendance would like to make for us? We'll get to work on those pieces that Shirley's brought to our attention, and we can figure out among the four of us how to do that. And when shall we complete them by? It's Thursday.
Our next meeting is
we need to do it before the next meeting.
Right.
In my mind, it would be great if we could do it in the next 48 hours.
Yeah, if anyone wants my help, I'd be happy to try to talk to plain English.
All right, it's on us, Sam, but thanks. Do we all feel like we could take a few paragraphs? What's on deck for next time? We've decided this, right?
Well, we're hoping to move ahead with, finish Article 1 and go on to Article 3.
So we have to finish Article 1, and then we've got, what was the plan?
Article 3. Article 3, then Article 4.
Article 1.
Saving 2, which
What,
is
Helen?
composition for life.
So,
Who's the chair?
Helen's got a
yeah.
hand up here.
Okay. I'm just wondering what you're translating. Are you translating
We were
the
just talking
original
about that.
document, or are you going to incorporate the suggestions in the conversation that happened tonight? Because there could be multiple times that you would need to translate this document into ordinary lay language.
I think that that's really a great question, and I think that, I am employed full-time. I'm not the only one on this task force who is. This is additional time that we have to take to do it. It takes time to do it well and to do it so that everyone can understand it, so we want to make sure we do it well. So I think part of this conversation that we have to have maybe before we leave here tonight is how much can we realistically spend time to translate, and I don't know that that's necessarily effectively done in conversation with the entire community. Maybe it would be better for us to do it and then put the results on the Facebook page, like who's doing what, or like how much of it we can chunk up and then pass out and be ready to discuss and post soon.
Well, Helen's question, though, is what form is it going to take? Does it incorporate the suggestions, or is it based on the original document?
So this doesn't answer the question for what we went over tonight, which maybe I don't know how to handle. But my assumption when we were talking about it is that we would take pieces of what we're talking about next time, so that the next discussion has both documents available and that those can be then edited. So then we'll have to backtrack on this somehow, but that's my
Okay.
And also the piece we didn't get to tonight.
Right.
Yeah.
So it would be Article 3 then.
That's
the last of Article 1 and then all of Article 3.
We're certainly not going to get beyond Article 3 next, I don't think. Article 3 is...
So it would basically be 1 and 3.
Well, it would be 1.4 and 3 for next time, and then we have to figure out.
Right, but
how to backtrack
I'm suggesting we do 1 and 3 because we have already said that we can go back to anything at any time.
But if we do what we've already done tonight, then we'd want to get the comments integrated first. And then, do you know what I'm saying? Like everything that came in tonight, so we'd have to have, I guess, Rich edit that portion, then give that to us, then we'd have to. So if it's okay with everyone, maybe what we can do is just be prepared for the next time. And then once we have this first 3, 1.1 and 1.2, 1.3 edited, then we can produce another.
I can try very quickly, I can try to present a modified version of 1.1 we did, that's 1.2.
Okay.
The mission statement is the main thing, and for, which will then be, take into account the comments tonight, and then you can work from there.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I say one quick thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I said this to a couple people today. I just want to make sure everyone's aware. I was at the city clerk's office today, picking up a couple registration to vote forms and discussing voting at the Coliseum, where people in Ward 4, Precinct 3 vote, and how parking is not very good there. And staff at the city clerk's office called the police on me. I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that.
Okay, so next meeting is June 28th. It's a week from tonight. And we can jump right in and start where we left off.
Although we may have new templates at that time that we may vote in
Yep.
other content.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.